Your parents apologized to you, not once or twice, they apologized regularly for losing their temper, for being on their phone too much, for not handling something the way they should have, and you didn't know what to do with that, because somewhere in the back of your mind there was this expectation: parents don't apologize, parents are just right. Even when they're wrong, they're still somehow in charge. That's how it's supposed to work, isn't it? But your parents didn't operate that way. They said sorry. They explained their thinking. They actually asked you, how you felt about family decisions. Should we move? What do you think about changing schools? Do you want to talk about what happened today? It wasn't that they treated you like an adult exactly. It was more like they treated you like a person, a whole person with thoughts that mattered and feelings that were valid, even if you were 12. If you grew up with millennial parents, if your childhood felt like your parents were figuring it out right alongside you, this video is going to name something you've carried without quite knowing how to describe it. Here's what actually happened to you. Your parents were the first generation to raise kids after the internet taught everyone that the way they were parented might have been kind of messed up. According to research from the Pew Research Center, millennials are the most educated generation in history, and a huge part of that education happened online. Parenting forums, therapy content, Instagram posts about attachment styles and generational trauma. They were learning in real time that maybe because I said so wasn't actually good parenting. Dr. Becky Kennedy, a clinical psychologist who studies what she calls good inside parenting, describes this shift. Millennial parents are trying to break cycles they didn't even know existed until they became parents themselves. They're parenting consciously, sometimes anxiously, but always with an awareness that previous generations just didn't have access to. So they tried something different. They validated your emotions instead of dismissing them. They explained consequences instead of just enforcing them. They said things like, "I need a minute," instead of just exploding. They were present, maybe too present, because they'd read about attachment theory and wanted you to feel secure. But here's what gets complicated. When your parents are this emotionally available, this willing to admit mistakes, this open about their own struggles, you never quite learned where they end and you begin. Because they were so focused on not repeating the patterns from their childhood, the emotional unavailability, the kids should be seen and not heard mentality, they sometimes forgot that you still needed them to be parents, not friends, not equals, parents. You learned to read their emotional states before they even said anything. You knew when mom was having a hard day before she told you. You understood that dad's frustration wasn't about you, even when you were 8 years old. You became emotionally fluent in a way previous generations weren't, but you also became responsible for managing feelings that weren't supposed to be your job to manage. And now you're an adult who struggles with boundaries, who feels guilty saying no, who can't quite figure out if your feelings are valid or if you're just being too sensitive. Because when your parents asked for your input on everything, when they made you part of every decision, when they treated your emotional experience as equal to their own, nobody taught you that some things aren't your responsibility to carry. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in your life now. Monday morning, you're at work and your mom texts asking if you're okay because you seemed stressed yesterday, and you feel guilty because you didn't respond fast enough. That's not motherly concern. That's what happens when boundaries were never clearly drawn because your parents wanted to be emotionally available, not emotionally invasive. Thursday evening, your dad calls to tell you about his bad day at work, and you end up giving him advice like you're his therapist. And afterward you realize you never mentioned the thing you needed to talk about because somewhere along the way you learned that their feelings came first. But wait, because here's where this gets particularly important to understand. Research from Jean Twenge at San Diego State University found that millennials report higher levels of anxiety and depression than previous generations, and a significant factor, the pressure of hyper-involved parenting that never taught clear emotional boundaries. When your parents made you part of every decision, when they treated your input as equal to an adult's, you never learned that some decisions aren't yours to make. Dr. Becky Kennedy calls this democratizing childhood beyond what's developmentally appropriate. Your parents thought they were respecting you, but children actually need parents to be in charge sometimes. You need to know that not everything is your responsibility to process or fix. And here's what makes this exhausting. You're incredibly emotionally intelligent. You can read a room instantly. You know when someone needs support before they ask, because you had to learn. Managing your parents' emotions while they were managing yours created this heightened awareness. But now you can't turn it off. So you became the friend everyone comes to, the one who always has good advice, the emotional support person in every relationship, and inside you're exhausted because you spent your whole childhood learning how to hold space for everyone's feelings, and nobody ever taught you that you're allowed to just be taken care of sometimes without having to earn it by being helpful first. So what does this mean for you now? First, your parents' emotional availability was real. It wasn't manipulation. They genuinely wanted to do better than how they were raised. But wanting to break cycles and knowing how to set boundaries are different skills. Second, you're not responsible for managing everyone's feelings. That heightened emotional intelligence you developed, reading rooms, sensing needs, that's valuable. But you're allowed to use it without sacrificing yourself every time. Third, unclear boundaries aren't a character flaw. They're what happens when parents try to be emotionally present without the roadmap for how to do that while still being in charge. You can appreciate what they were trying to do while still learning the boundaries they couldn't teach you. And here's what nobody tells you. The closeness you have with your parents is real. The fact that they apologized, that they asked your opinion, that they treated you like your feelings mattered, that actually was better than generations before. It just came with a cost nobody anticipated. If you grew up with millennial parents who were trying to break cycles in real time, you're not damaged. You're just learning boundaries they couldn't model because they were figuring it out too. Watch our video on people who were parentified next. Different pattern, same generation. Subscribe for more psychology on family patterns nobody talks about. And comment, did your parents apologize to you? You're not alone in this.